The massive chamber of the Galactic Council stretched out like a metal canyon, its walls lined with viewing platforms for dozens of alien species. Strange lights blinked from control panels while the air hummed with translation devices working overtime. In the center of it all, Captain Jake Morrison stood perfectly still, his dark blue uniform crisp and clean despite the long journey from human space. Morrison held a small datapad in his weathered hands. His face showed no emotion as hundreds of alien eyes, stalks, and sensors focused on him. Some of the creatures watching him had multiple arms, others floated in glass tanks filled with strange gases, and a few looked almost human except for their silver skin or extra fingers. All of them waited to hear what humanity had decided about the peace talks. Ambassador Zekathar of the Vortani Empire sat on a raised platform to Morrison's left. The tall, thin alien had skin like polished stone and eyes that glowed soft blue. He had spent the last 6 months trying to arrange these peace talks between humans and the Krell hegemony. Everyone expected the humans to accept the deal. After all, the Krell had bigger ships and more soldiers. The Krell delegation occupied the far side of the chamber. They looked like giant insects walking on 2 legs, with 4 arms each, and heads covered in small black eyes. Their leader, War Prime, Koros, clicked his mandibles together in what might have been nervousness. The sound echoed through the chamber like fingers tapping on metal. Morrison cleared his throat and began to read from his datapad. His voice carried clearly through the translation system to every corner of the chamber. The United Earth Alliance has carefully considered the Galactic Council's proposal for mediated peace talks with the Krell hegemony, Morrison said. His words were calm and professional, like he was reading a weather report instead of delivering news that would change everything. Counselor Thiss of the Melody Federation leaned forward in her floating chair. The Melody looked like dolphins with arms and legs, and Thiss had been working hard to arrange this peace deal. She believed all conflicts could be solved through talking and compromise. After thorough discussion with our military command and civilian government, Morrison continued, humanity respectfully declines the Council's offer of mediation. The chamber erupted into chaos. Aliens began making sounds that the translation devices couldn't handle properly. Some creatures hissed, others clicked, and a few made electronic noises that sounded like broken computers. The Krell delegation jumped to their feet, their forearms waving wildly. War Prime Koros stepped forward, his voice booming through the chamber even before the translators could catch up. This is madness. The humans cannot refuse council mediation. It is against all galactic law. Morrison waited for the noise to die down before he spoke again. The Krell hegemony initiated hostilities against human colonies in the Outer Rim 6 months ago. They targeted civilian populations, including families and children. Under these circumstances, humanity will resolve this conflict on our own terms. Emergency. Session Coordinator Veltar, a creature that looked like a walking tree with too many branches, activated his communication panel. Red lights began flashing throughout the chamber as he called for order. Counselor Thiss's voice shook as she spoke. Captain Morrison, please reconsider. The Krell have already lost significant territory to your forces. They are willing to pay reparations for the colonies they attacked. War Prime Koros has agreed to withdraw from all disputed systems. Morrison turned to face her directly. When he spoke, his voice was steady, but there was something in his eyes that made several aliens step back from their viewing platforms. Counselor Thiss, with respect, the Krell started this war by killing innocent people. They will surrender completely and give up all their weapons, or we will continue our advance until they no longer exist as a threat to human space or anyone else. The chamber fell silent. Even the background hum of the translation devices seemed quieter. War Prime Koros's mandibles clicked rapidly as he processed what he had just heard. You cannot be serious, Koros said, his electronic voice rising in pitch. My empire spans 47 star systems. We have 1 million soldiers and 10,000 warships. You humans control barely 20 systems. Morrison looked at the Krell leader for a long moment. Then he smiled, and somehow that expression was more frightening than any threat. War Prime Koros, your empire had 10,000 warships 6 months ago. According to our latest intelligence reports, You now have fewer than 4,000 ships still capable of fighting. Your million soldiers are scattered across worlds that can no longer support them because we have destroyed your supply lines." The captain paused and looked around the chamber at all the watching aliens. "You seem to think this is a negotiation. It is not. This is us explaining what is going to happen next." Veltar's branches shook as he frantically worked his communication panel. Messages were flooding in from across the galaxy. Scout ships were reporting human fleet movements that didn't match any known battle plans. Krell distress calls were coming in from systems that had been considered secure just days ago. Ambassador Zekthar finally found his voice. "Captain Morrison, surely you understand that continued warfare serves no one's interests. The Council has mediated thousands of conflicts over the centuries. We have protocols, established procedures that have maintained galactic peace." Morrison folded his datapad and tucked it into his uniform jacket. "Ambassador, your protocols work fine for species that view war as an unfortunate necessity to be conducted with honor and restraint. Humans view war differently." "How?" Thais asked, though her voice suggested she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. "We view war as a problem that needs to be solved permanently," Morrison replied. "The Krell attacked our civilians. They made themselves our problem. We are now solving that problem in the most efficient way possible." The captain turned toward the chamber's exit but stopped when War Prime Koros called out to him. "What are your terms?" Koros asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Morrison looked back over his shoulder. "Complete surrender, immediate withdrawal from all occupied territories, total disarmament of your military forces, submission to human administration of your territories until we are satisfied. You will never again pose a threat to peaceful civilizations." "And if we refuse?" Koros asked. Morrison's smile returned. "War Prime, you are already refusing. That is why our fleets are currently surrounding your remaining strongholds. Admiral Lisa Grant sends her regards, by the way. She wanted me to tell you that Phase 1 operations are proceeding ahead of schedule." The human captain walked toward the exit, his footsteps echoing in the silent chamber. Just before he reached the door, he turned back one final time. "Oh, and Counselor Thys? The next time you want to mediate a conflict involving humans, you might want to make sure both sides actually want to stop fighting first." The door closed behind Morrison with a soft hiss, leaving the Galactic Council chamber in stunned silence. It took several minutes before anyone moved or spoke. When they finally did, it was to begin what would later be called the most desperate emergency session in Council history. 3 weeks had passed since Captain Morrison walked out of the Council chamber, and Dr. Amy Chen had not slept properly in any of them. The human military analyst sat hunched over her desk in the Council's research wing, surrounded by data screens, showing numbers that made no sense according to everything she knew about space warfare. The emergency assembly hall buzzed with nervous energy as delegates from 43 different species waited for her report. Dr. Chen gathered her papers with shaking hands and walked to the central podium. The bright lights made her squint, but she could see the desperate faces of creatures who were beginning to understand that their galaxy had changed forever. "Honored delegates," Chen began, her voice amplified through the translation system. "The situation in human Krell space has developed beyond our worst projections. In 21 standard days, human forces have captured or destroyed 60% of all Krell military assets." A wave of clicks, hisses, and electronic sounds swept through the assembly. Counselor Thys raised one of her flipper-like hands for permission to speak. "Dr. Chen, that cannot be correct. Our intelligence reports indicated the Krell possessed the largest military force in this sector. How could they lose so much so quickly?" Chen activated her holographic display, showing a 3-dimensional map of the war zone. Red dots marked Krell positions while blue dots showed human forces. Over the past 3 weeks, the red dots had been disappearing at an alarming rate. The human fleet operates under completely different tactical principles than anything we have observed before, Chen explained. Traditional space combat involves large formations meeting in predetermined battle zones. Humans appear to have abandoned this approach entirely. She zoomed in on the Kepler system, where a major battle had taken place just 2 days earlier. Captain Roy Martinez of the UES Vanguard, led a force of 12 ships against a Krell fleet of 38 vessels. According to our sensors, the human ships scattered in all directions the moment they detected the enemy. War Prime Koros, who had been granted asylum on the council station, stood up from his assigned seat. The former Krell leader looked nothing like the confident warrior who had once commanded an empire. His forearms trembled as he spoke. "The humans fight like madmen," Koros said, his translated voice filled with frustration. "They do not hold formation. They do not protect their heavy ships. They attack from directions that make no tactical sense." Chen nodded grimly. Captain Martinez's ship spent 6 hours leading the Krell fleet through an asteroid field. Our observers thought the humans were retreating. Instead, they were positioning the Krell forces exactly where they wanted them. The holographic display showed the battle's progression. Human ships had darted between asteroids like insects, always staying just out of effective weapons range. The larger Krell vessels had followed, trying to corner them in what seemed like obvious tactical mistakes. When the Krell fleet finally thought they had the humans trapped, Chen continued, Martinez's ships suddenly coordinated their fire on specific asteroids. The resulting debris field destroyed or disabled 22 Krell vessels in less than 10 minutes. Ambassador Zekthar's stone-like face showed the first emotion Chen had ever seen from him. They used the environment as a weapon. This is not standard space combat doctrine. Nothing about human warfare follows standard doctrine, Chen replied. Ground forces under Colonel Beth Parker have been liberating occupied worlds using tactics that completely bypass traditional defensive strategies. She switched the display to show planetary assault reports. On Kel Prime, Parker's forces landed in small groups across the planet's entire surface. Instead of securing landing zones and advancing in formation, they moved independently toward seemingly random targets. The display showed hundreds of small blue dots spreading across a planet-sized map like drops of water. Then, within hours, critical infrastructure across the entire world had gone dark. The humans targeted power plants, communication hubs, and supply depots simultaneously across 3 continents, Chen explained. The Krell garrison found themselves cut off from their command structure and supply lines without ever seeing a major battle. Counselor Veltar's branches rustled as he processed the information. This seems like an extremely complex operation. How do human forces coordinate such attacks without centralized command? The answer came from an unexpected source. A new transmission screen activated, showing the face of General Sam Rodriguez. The human officer appeared to be broadcasting from a command ship somewhere in the war zone. Counselor Veltar, I have been monitoring your emergency session through diplomatic channels, Rodriguez said. His voice was calm and professional, but his eyes showed the same unsettling confidence Chen had seen in Captain Morrison. I received permission to address your concerns directly. The assembly fell silent. This was the first time a human military commander had spoken to the council since Morrison's dramatic exit. General Rodriguez, this said carefully, we are trying to understand how your forces have achieved such rapid success against a numerically superior enemy. Rodriguez smiled, and Chen noticed several delegates flinch at the expression. Counselor Thiss, every species in this galaxy seems to view war as a necessary evil, something to be conducted with restraint and honor. We view war as a problem that needs to be solved permanently. What does that mean? Zekthar asked. It means we do not fight wars to make political points or claim territory, Rodriguez explained. We fight wars to eliminate threats. When the Krell attacked our civilians, they became a threat that needed to be eliminated. We are now eliminating that threat using the most efficient methods available. War Prime Koros leaned forward, his mandibles clicking rapidly. Your methods are impossible to predict. My commanders cannot develop counter-strategies against tactics that change every day. That is the point, Rodriguez said simply. Your military doctrine assumes your enemy will behave rationally according to established patterns. Human military doctrine assumes the enemy will adapt to whatever we do, so we make sure they cannot adapt fast enough. Dr. Chen realized with growing horror what the general was describing. You are not just winning battles, she said. You are preventing the Krell from learning how to fight you. Correct, Rodriguez confirmed. Every engagement teaches them that their previous assumptions were wrong, but before they can develop new assumptions, we change our methods again. This creates a learning curve they cannot overcome. The communication screen flickered as Rodriguez received some kind of message. When he looked back at the council assembly, his expression had become more serious. "I'm afraid I must cut this discussion short," he said. "The Krell delegation has just attempted to contact their remaining fleet commanders. We cannot allow them to share intelligence about our conversation." Before anyone could respond, the transmission ended. Within minutes, reports began flooding in from across the war zone. Human forces were launching simultaneous attacks on 12 different Krell strongholds, using completely new tactics that bore no resemblance to anything they had done before. "Doctor." Chen slumped in her chair as she watched the tactical displays update in real time. Red dots representing Krell positions winked out one by one, replaced by blue dots marking human control. The assembled delegates sat in stunned silence as they realized they were not just watching a war. They were watching the systematic dismantling of an entire military civilization by opponents who treated warfare as applied science rather than ritualized conflict. Supreme Arbiter Quindal had lived for 300 years and seen 12 galactic wars, but nothing had prepared him for what was happening now. The ancient reptilian leader stood before the largest emergency assembly in council history, his scaled hands shaking as he read the latest intelligence reports. "The situation has moved beyond crisis," Quindal announced to the packed chamber. "Human forces have begun attacking Krell homeworld systems. We are no longer observing a territorial dispute. We are witnessing the systematic conquest of an entire civilization." The chamber erupted in panicked voices from dozens of species. In the 3 days since Dr. Chen's briefing, everything had gotten worse, much worse. Commander Rick Stone of the human fleet had made that clear when he politely but firmly escorted Council peacekeeping ships out of the combat zone. The Altarian Republic had sent their finest diplomatic vessels to establish a neutral zone between the warring fleets. Stone's response had been swift and professional. "Any interference in ongoing military operations will be treated as an act of hostility toward humanity," Stone had told the Altarian captains over open communication channels. Within hours, 20 human warships had surrounded the peacekeeping fleet and guided them back to neutral space. What terrified the council most was how polite Stone had been about it. No threats, no anger, just calm explanation that their presence was not welcome in the war zone. The humans treated council intervention like a minor scheduling problem to be resolved efficiently. Ambassador Thais floated in her chair near the front of the assembly, her dolphin-like features showing deep worry. "Supreme Arbiter, we have received confirmation that human ground forces have landed on Krelltar itself. The Krell homeworld is under direct assault." War Prime Koros, who had been growing more desperate each day, stood up in his assigned section. The former Krell leader had lost most of his imperial bearing and now looked like a broken insect. "They are not just attacking military targets," Koros said, his forearms gesturing wildly. "The humans have begun orbital bombardments of our industrial centers, our shipyards, our weapons factories. But they are doing it with surgical precision that should be impossible." Dr. Chen, who had been monitoring the attacks through long-range sensors, activated her display screens. The images showed massive human warships hanging in space above Krell worlds like metal moons. "The bombardments are indeed precise beyond anything we have recorded," Chen reported. "Human ships are targeting individual buildings from orbital distance while leaving surrounding structures untouched. Military installations are being destroyed while civilian areas remain unharmed." Councillor Veltar's branches rustled with anxiety. "How is such accuracy possible? Even our most advanced targeting systems cannot achieve that level of precision during orbital bombardment." The answer came from an unexpected source. Major Kate Williams appeared on the main communication screen, broadcasting from what looked like a human command center on one of the invaded Krell worlds. "Council members," Williams said, her voice professional but tired. "I have been authorized to provide limited information about our current operations. The precision you are observing is the result of intelligence networks that have been mapping Krell infrastructure for decades." The chamber fell silent. Decades. Williams continued speaking while the implications of that word sank in. Human intelligence services have been conducting detailed surveys of Krell space since our first contact with their empire 15 years ago. We have architectural plans for every major military installation, shipping schedules for their supply, convoys and personnel records for their command structure. Supreme Arbiter Quindal felt his ancient heart skip a beat. Major Williams, are you saying that humanity has been preparing for this war since before the Krell attacked your colonies? Williams paused, and when she spoke again, her words sent chills through every delegate in the chamber. Supreme Arbiter, humanity has been preparing for every possible war since we developed space travel. The Krell chose to make themselves our problem. We are now implementing solutions that were developed years ago. The display screens around the chamber began showing tactical maps that made seasoned military observers gasp in shock. Human forces were not just winning battles. They were executing complex operations that required months or years of advanced planning. Lieutenant Commander Nick Torres, who had been assigned as humanity's military liaison to the Council, stepped forward to address the assembly directly. Unlike the other human officers they had seen, Torres looked completely relaxed, as if discussing the systematic conquest of an entire civilization was routine business. Honored delegates, Torres said, I understand your concern about the scope of our operations. However, I want to assure you that everything we are doing falls within established parameters for conflict resolution. Established by whom? Zekthar demanded, his stone-like composure finally cracking. By us, Torres replied simply. The human military operates under the assumption that any conflict we enter must be resolved permanently. Half measures and temporary solutions create future problems. We solve problems completely the first time. War Prime Koros leaned forward, his multiple eyes fixed on Torres. What does permanently mean? Are you planning to exterminate my people? Torres shook his head. War Prime, we are not interested in genocide. We are interested in ensuring that Krell military forces will never again be capable of threatening human space or any other peaceful civilization. The lieutenant commander activated his own display, showing current military positions throughout former Krell space. Your remaining fleet commanders have 3 options. They can surrender immediately and their personnel will be treated according to standard prisoner protocols. They can continue fighting and face total military defeat. Or, they can attempt to negotiate individual surrender terms with local human commanders. Theiss made a sound that the translators interpreted as distress. Commander Torres, what you are describing is not war. It is conquest on a scale not seen in this galaxy for centuries. Counselor Theiss, the Krell Empire controlled 47 star systems and threatened the security of hundreds of other worlds. That threat is being eliminated systematically and permanently. We consider this a proportional response to their aggression. The chamber's communication systems suddenly activated, flooding the assembly with incoming messages from across the galaxy. Torres glanced at his personal communicator and smiled in a way that made several delegates step back from their podiums. I'm receiving word that Krell resistance in the Outer Rim has collapsed, Torres announced. Admiral Grant reports that the remaining Krell fleet has requested terms for complete surrender. Phase 1 operations are now complete. Supreme Arbiter Quindal found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. Phase 1? How many phases are there? Torres consulted his communicator again, and his smile grew wider. That information is classified, Supreme Arbiter. However, I can tell you that Admiral Grant is requesting authorization to begin Phase 2 deployment. The ancient reptilian leader felt his legs give out, and he slumped into his ceremonial chair. Around the chamber, delegates from dozens of species began making their own distressed sounds as they realized the full scope of what they were witnessing. War Prime Koros collapsed into his seat, his forearms hanging limply at his sides. My empire, he whispered. My people, what have we done? Torres looked at the broken Krell leader with something that might have been sympathy. War Prime, you made a choice 6 months ago to attack human civilians. Every consequence that followed was a direct result of that choice. The communication screens around the chamber began displaying updated tactical maps. Red dots representing Krell forces were disappearing from system after system, replaced by blue dots marking human control. The Krell Empire which had dominated this sector of space for over 2 centuries, was ceasing to exist in real time. 6 months after Captain Morrison walked out of the council chamber, Admiral Lisa Grant stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution as it approached the council station. The massive human dreadnought dwarfed every other ship in the area, its dark hull gleaming under the station's lights like polished metal. Grant looked out at the collection of alien vessels surrounding the station and smiled. 6 months ago, those same ships had belonged to species that viewed humanity as aggressive newcomers who needed to be controlled. Now their captains were sending polite requests for meetings about mutual defense agreements. The war was over. The Krell Empire no longer existed as a military force. What remained of their civilization was scattered across dozens of worlds, all under human administration. The speed and completeness of the victory had shocked every species in the galaxy. Director Paul Jenkins of the Human Diplomatic Corps walked beside Grant as they headed toward the docking bay. Jenkins carried a briefcase full of documents that would reshape galactic politics for generations to come. "Admiral, are you sure about this approach?" Jenkins asked. "The council delegates are still in shock. We could probably negotiate much better terms if we waited a few more weeks." Grant shook her head. "Director, we are not here to negotiate. We are here to explain what happens next. There is a difference." The council chamber looked different than it had 6 months ago. The same aliens sat in the same seats, but their body language had changed completely. Where once there had been confidence and authority, now there was nervous energy and barely concealed fear. Supreme Arbiter Quindal rose from his ceremonial chair as Grant and Jenkins entered. The ancient reptilian leader looked like he had aged decades in the past 6 months. "Admiral Grant," Quindal said, his voice carefully controlled, "the Galactic Council welcomes you to discuss the resolution of the Krell situation." Grant nodded politely and walked to the center of the chamber. She did not carry any notes or data pads. Everything she needed to say had been memorized long ago. "Supreme Arbiter, honored delegates," Grant began, "I am here to inform you of the new administrative arrangements for former Krell space. These territories are now under human governance, with former Krell personnel serving in support roles under human supervision." The chamber remained silent, but Grant could see the tension in every alien face. They had expected this, but hearing it stated so matter-of-factly still came as a shock. Counselor Thiss raised one of her flipper-like hands. "Admiral, what will happen to the Krell population? There are billions of beings on those worlds. Those Krell who demonstrate genuine commitment to peaceful coexistence will be gradually integrated into human space as autonomous regions," Grant replied. "Those who do not will remain under direct human administration until we are satisfied they no longer pose a threat." Commander Lisa Stone, who had been standing near the entrance, stepped forward. She carried a data pad with casualty reports that still made her shake her head in disbelief. "The numbers speak for themselves," Stone announced to the assembly. Human military casualties during the entire campaign totaled fewer than 10,000 personnel. Krell military casualties exceeded 2 million, with their entire military infrastructure systematically eliminated. War Prime Koros, who had spent the last 6 months as a broken refugee on the council station, let out a sound that the translators rendered as a sob. 2 million of my people," he whispered. "An entire civilization's military force." Grant looked at the former Krell leader with what might have been sympathy. "War Prime, your people chose to target human civilians. Every military professional knows that attacking non-combatants changes the nature of any conflict. You escalated to total war. We simply finished what you started." Ambassador Zekthar, who had spent months trying to arrange the failed peace talks, finally found his voice. "Admiral Grant, surely you understand that this level of efficiency in warfare concerns other species. How can we be certain that humanity will not view us as threats to be eliminated?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Every delegate in the chamber leaned forward slightly, waiting for Grant's answer. This was what they really wanted to know, not what had happened to the Krell, but what might happen to them. Grant considered the question for a long moment before answering. "Ambassador Zekthar, humanity has no interest in conquering peaceful civilizations. The Krell made themselves our problem by attacking our colonies. We solved that problem permanently. She gestured toward the viewing screens that showed the former Krell territories. Every species in this galaxy now has concrete evidence of what happens when human civilians are targeted. We consider this a valuable educational opportunity. Director Jenkins opened his briefcase and began distributing documents to the various delegations. These are the formal agreements establishing human governance over former Krell space, he explained. We are also prepared to discuss mutual defense treaties with any species interested in long-term partnerships. The response was immediate. Representatives from over a dozen species began raising their hands, tentacles, or other appendages to request private meetings. The same aliens who had viewed humanity as dangerous newcomers 6 months ago were now eager to discuss alliance agreements. Counselor Veltar's branches rustled as he processed one of Jenkins's documents. These terms are surprisingly reasonable, he said, surprise clear in his translated voice. We told you from the beginning, Grant replied. Humanity is not interested in conquest for its own sake. We are interested in permanent solutions to security problems. The chamber's main communication screen activated, showing the face of President Claire Johnson broadcasting from Earth. The human leader looked tired but satisfied as she addressed the Galactic Council for the first time. Honored delegates, President Johnson said. 6 months ago, humanity sought a peaceful resolution to Krell aggression through your mediation. When that proved inadequate, we implemented our own solution. The Krell no longer pose a threat to human space or to any peaceful civilization. Supreme Arbiter Quindahl leaned forward in his chair. President Johnson, what assurance can you give that humanity will not view other conflicts as opportunities for similar implementations? Johnson's smile was both reassuring and terrifying. Supreme Arbiter, humanity has no desire to police the galaxy. However, any species that chooses to target human civilians should understand that we will respond with whatever level of force is necessary to eliminate the threat permanently. The President's image flickered as the transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in complete silence. Grant looked around at the assembled delegates and saw the same expression on every face, regardless of species. It was the look of beings who had just realized that their galaxy operated under different rules than they had previously understood. Admiral Grant nodded to Director Jenkins, and they began walking toward the chamber exit. As they reached the door, Grant turned back to address the council one final time. The Krell learned that humanity treats warfare as applied problem-solving rather than ritualized conflict, she said. We hope this lesson will prove educational for other species as well. The door closed behind them with a soft hiss, leaving the Galactic Council to contemplate a galaxy where humanity had just demonstrated that some problems could indeed be solved permanently. In the silence that followed, Counselor Thiss made a sound that the translators interpreted as nervous laughter. Well, she said to no one in particular, I suppose we know now why they rejected the peace talks.